The suitcase was supposed to be the first thing I saw when she walked through the door. Instead, it was the absence of it that froze me. Corinne stood there in the entryway, hands shoved into her coat pockets, like she'd just remembered she was somewhere she didn't want to be. She didn't hug me. She didn't even drop her purse. She just looked past me, scanning the living room like she expected it to be different. "You're back early," I said. Her eyes flicked to mine for less than a second. "Yeah." Trip ended sooner than planned. The lie was so soft, so careful, it was almost like she wanted me to miss it. But I didn't. And then my gaze dropped again to where the suitcase should have been. That teal roller with the squeaky wheel that once drove me insane in airport security lines. Not there. And before I could ask, she added, "Airline lost it. They'll send it in a few days." Too fast. Too neat. That should have been the end of it. But my mind started buzzing, the way it does when something tiny and harmless starts to feel sharp. I pictured the bag, somewhere out there, not lost, just hidden. And for the first time, I wondered what could be inside it that she didn't want crossing our doorstep. Corinne moved through the morning like nothing had happened, humming to herself while making coffee, scrolling through her phone like I wasn't even in the room. I sat at the table pretending to read emails, but every sound, the spoon clinking against the mug, the chair creaking, felt louder than it should have. My mind kept returning to that teal suitcase. I didn't sleep much the night before. I kept replaying the way she'd said they'll send it in a few days. No specifics, no airline name, not even a groan about how inconvenient it was. Corinne complains if the Wi-Fi lags for 30 seconds. There's no way she'd shrug off losing her entire bag unless she wanted me not to ask questions. She left for work a little earlier than usual. The moment I heard her car pull away, I got up and went straight to her purse again. My hands were clammy, my stomach tight. I wasn't looking for trouble. I just wanted something to quiet the storm in my head. Instead, I found the opposite. At the very bottom, beneath a wad of receipts and a half-empty pack of gum, was the hotel stationery I'd noticed yesterday. This time, I unfolded it. It wasn't blank. It had a phone number scribbled in rushed handwriting and a single word, Tuesday. No last name, no explanation. It wasn't the city she told me she'd been in. Not even close. I sat there staring at it for a good minute, my pulse in my ears. The logical part of me said it could be a business contact, a meeting she forgot to tell me about. The other part, the one I was trying hard not to listen to, was whispering all the ugly scenarios that keep husbands up at night. I decided I needed to check something. I grabbed my laptop and went to her airline's website. With the trip details she'd mentioned, I tried to locate her supposed lost luggage report. Nothing came up. No record. Either the airline system was broken, or the report never existed. That's when the thought stopped being a faint hum and became something sharper. If the suitcase wasn't with the airline, where was it? And what was in it that she didn't want anywhere near our house? By the time Corinne texted me around lunch, a casual, busy day, "Don't wait for me for dinner," I'd already decided I wasn't going to just sit here. I was going to find that bag. And whether I liked the answer or not, I was going to know. The stationery had been gnawing at me all night. I'd shoved it into my jacket pocket, thinking I could forget about it until I calmed down. But that didn't happen. If anything, the more I tried to focus on other things, the more the name printed at the top of the paper flashed in my mind like a neon sign. By late morning, I caved. I sat down at my desk, typed the hotel's name into the search bar, and hit enter. I expected something small, some modest business traveler spot. Instead, my screen filled with glossy images of a boutique hotel 3 cities away. The kind of place with rooftop lounges, champagne welcome drinks, and rooms that cost more than my first car. Corinne hates hotels like that. She says they're pretentious and wasteful. But there it was, right on the page in front of me. The same logo, same font as on the stationery in my pocket. My stomach sank lower when I clicked on the location tab. The hotel wasn't just in a different city. It was in a city where Corinne had zero reason to be. No clients. No family. No friends. I stared at the address, my mind running in ugly circles. Maybe she'd been sent there for some unplanned meeting? Maybe the client retreat had changed venues at the last minute? Those were the kinds of excuses I clung to, but they felt thin, like tissue paper over something heavy. Then I remembered the phone number scribbled across the page. My first instinct was to call it immediately, but something in me hesitated. If I called, and it was nothing, I'd look like a paranoid fool. If I called, and it was something, I didn't know if I was ready to hear it. Instead, I went to the hotel's website and looked through their photo gallery, trying to imagine her there. The images showed a dimly lit lobby with leather armchairs, a rooftop bar with strings of warm lights, and rooms with giant beds covered in white linen. I could almost see her sitting in that bar, leaning in close to someone over a glass of wine, her suitcase tucked by her side. That's when it hit me. If the suitcase really was there, it wouldn't be sitting in some airport warehouse waiting to be delivered. It would be in that hotel, maybe even still in the room she stayed in. And if it was, there was a chance I could find it along with whatever was inside. I didn't tell Corinne I was leaving town. I just grabbed my keys, stuffed the stationery and my laptop into my bag, and got in the car. It was a 2-hour drive, and every mile felt like I was moving toward a truth I didn't want, but couldn't turn away from. By the time the hotel came into view, tall glass windows reflecting the pale afternoon sky, my heart was pounding so hard it was all I could hear. I pulled into the lot, sat there gripping the steering wheel, and asked myself the question I'd been avoiding since the night she came home. What if I'm not ready for the answer? The hotel's lobby was the kind of place that made you feel underdressed the second you stepped inside. Warm amber light poured over everything, from the polished wood floors to the towering floral arrangement that smelled faintly of roses and something expensive I couldn't name. My sneakers squeaked against the floor, every sound exaggerated, and for a moment I wondered if everyone there could somehow see why I had come. The woman at the front desk was all perfect hair and polite smiles. "Checking in?" she asked, glancing at the overnight bag I'd thrown together as a prop. My plan was shaky at best, part curiosity, part desperation. I leaned in a little and lowered my voice. "Actually, I think my wife stayed here a few nights ago. There's a mix-up with her luggage, and I'm just trying to confirm if it's still here. She was in for a conference." Her eyes flicked to the screen. "What's her name?" I gave it, and she typed. I could see the hesitation in the way her fingers slowed. She found something, but her smile didn't falter. "I'm sorry, sir, I can't disclose guest details. Privacy policy." Of course. I expected that. But then she added, almost as an afterthought, "Although, if you're asking about lost property, that's handled by our security office. I can call someone up." 2 minutes later, a man in a blazer approached, holding a clipboard. He asked for my ID, just to make a note, then flipped through a list. "We do have an unclaimed item from that room. It was checked out yesterday morning." My heart thumped so hard, I had to consciously slow my breathing. "What is it?" He hesitated. "A suitcase. Teal. Slight damage to one wheel." There it was. My chest felt tight, not from relief, but from the confirmation that the airline had never been in the picture. She hadn't lost her bag. She'd left it here. The man glanced toward a door behind the desk. "It's in our storage. If you can verify the owner's details, we can release it." I handed over Curran's information, my palms damp. After a short wait, he returned, rolling the teal suitcase across the polished floor. Seeing it again was like spotting a ghost. It was heavier than I remembered when I took the handle, and the zipper pull had been replaced with a cheap plastic tab. Something inside shifted when I moved it, a dull, solid sound that didn't match the way her bag usually packed. It felt wrong, different. I thanked them, forcing a smile, and walked out as casually as I could manage. But the moment I reached the parking lot, I tossed the bag into the trunk, slammed it shut, and just stood there with my hands on the car roof. I wanted to open it right then, rip it open, and see everything. But part of me wasn't sure if I should do that in a hotel parking lot, under security cameras, with strangers walking by. I decided I'd drive somewhere quiet. Somewhere I could unzip it without anyone watching. That was the plan. But halfway down the highway, I started hearing the faintest metallic clink from the trunk with every bump in the road, and my imagination began tearing itself apart with possibilities. The clinking sound from the trunk wouldn't stop. It was faint, irregular, like something lightly tapping against metal, but it kept pulling my thoughts into darker places. At first I told myself it was probably a zipper pull or a loose travel lock bouncing around. But the longer I drove, the more I realized the sound wasn't random. It came only when I hit a bump or slowed down too quickly, as if whatever was inside had weighed in edges. I took the next exit off the highway and followed a winding road until it spit me out at a nearly empty picnic area by a half-frozen lake. No one else was around except for a single sedan parked on the far side, its driver asleep or pretending to be. The air was sharp and cold when I stepped out, my breath curling in front of me. Popping the trunk felt heavier than it should have. Maybe because my hand didn't want to move, or maybe because I already knew I wouldn't like what I saw. The teal suitcase sat there, still as stone, the squeaky wheel catching the weak sunlight. I pulled it out and set it on the gravel. My fingers hesitated over the cheap plastic zipper pull, the one I hadn't seen before. It was a poor replacement, and for a moment I pictured someone swapping it in a hurry, without the right tools. When the zipper finally gave, it stuck halfway, like something inside was pressing against it. I tugged harder, and the suitcase opened in a slow, reluctant arc. The first thing I noticed was the smell, not bad, not rotting, but sharp and chemical, like hotel cleaning agents mixed with something metallic. Inside, there were clothes, but not the way she usually packed them. They were stuffed in haphazardly, wrinkled, some inside out, like they'd been thrown together fast. Mixed in between them were things that didn't belong to her at all. A man's black t-shirt in a size too large, a baseball cap from a team she couldn't care less about, and a phone charger for a model we don't own. And at the bottom, wedged in the corner, was the source of the metallic sound, a small lockbox, scratched and dented, with no key. It was heavier than it looked, and when I lifted it, something shifted inside with a muted thud. I stood there for a long minute, just staring at it, the cold biting through my jacket. My pulse was in my throat. This was the kind of moment where you either open it right there and face whatever's inside, or you slam the suitcase shut and pretend you never saw it. I knew which one I was going to choose. I stuffed the lockbox under my arm, zipped the suitcase just enough to hide the rest, and threw it back into the trunk. Whatever answers it held, I was taking them home, and I was going to open it where no one could see my reaction. But as I got back in the car and glanced in the rearview mirror, I noticed something that made my skin crawl. The sedan that had been parked across the lot wasn't there anymore. By the time I got home, my knuckles were stiff from gripping the steering wheel. I parked in the driveway and sat there for a moment, staring at the lockbox on the passenger seat. It was dented in one corner, the kind of damage you get from being tossed around without care. Whatever was inside wasn't delicate, at least not in the way glass or electronics are. It had a weight to it, a density that suggested something you'd either want to hide or protect. I took it into the garage instead of the house. The concrete floor and dim light felt safer for something like this. Pulling a set of old screwdrivers from a shelf, I knelt beside it and tried the lock first, a tiny brass mechanism with a keyhole no bigger than my thumbnail. No give. I tried a thin flathead, wiggling it inside, but the tumblers didn't budge. That's when my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen, expecting a spam text or maybe a notification from my bank. Instead, it was a message from an unknown number. You have something that doesn't belong to you. I froze. The lockbox sat in front of me like it had grown heavier. Before I could think, another message appeared. Put it back where you found it. Today. There was no name, no threat, no explanation. But my mind immediately went to the car I'd seen leaving the picnic area earlier. The one that had been parked far away, with the driver I couldn't see. The coincidence was too much to ignore. I typed back before my brain could catch up to my fingers. Who is this? No reply. For the first time since finding the suitcase, I wasn't just curious. I was aware that I'd stepped into something much bigger than a possible affair. Corinne's lies, the hotel, the strange items in the suitcase. It was all part of a web I couldn't see the edges of yet. And now someone else was pulling on a thread. I slid the lockbox under an old tarp in the corner of the garage, covering it with a box of tangled extension cords. As I stood there, I realized something important. The message hadn't said what I supposedly had, just that I had something, which meant whoever sent it might not even know about the suitcase. Or worse, they knew exactly what was in it, and they were already close enough to see me. I didn't touch the lockbox for 2 days. It stayed hidden under the tarp in the garage, buried beneath the extension cords, as if hiding it could somehow stall whatever was unfolding. But avoiding it didn't stop the unease. If anything, it made it worse. Every time I stepped into the garage, I felt like I was walking into a room where someone had just been standing, a faint trace of presence lingering in the air. On the third night, after Corinne went to bed early again, no explanation, just a muttered, long day, I decided to try opening it. I waited until the house was still, then slipped into the garage with a flashlight and a hammer. The cold concrete pressed against my knees as I pulled the lockbox out from under the tarp. I had barely set it on the workbench when something caught my eye. The tarp was folded differently, not wildly out of place, just wrong, like someone had lifted it and tried to put it back the way they thought it was. My chest tightened. I'd been the only one in here since I brought the lockbox home. At least, I thought I had. I tapped the box with the hammer, testing the sound. Solid. I was about to bring it down harder when the security light outside the garage flicked on. A pale wash of light spilled through the small window, and in the corner of my vision, I caught movement, a shadow gliding across the driveway. I killed the flashlight and froze. The shadow paused, then shifted again, slow and deliberate, like someone trying not to be noticed. I strained to hear footsteps, but all I caught was the faint hum of the fridge in the corner. After what felt like minutes, the shadow slipped out of the light's range, and the motion sensor clicked off. I waited, counting to 60 twice, before peeking out the side door. The driveway was empty, the street beyond it dark. But in the thin layer of dust on the hood of my car, there was a single, fresh fingerprint. I went back inside without touching the lockbox again. My hammer hand was trembling, not from fear exactly, but from the certainty that whoever had been watching me knew exactly what I had, and was patient enough to wait until I made the first move. I didn't sleep that night. Every creak in the house felt amplified. Every shadow in the hallway stretched a little too long. By sunrise, I'd made my decision. The lockbox wasn't staying shut another day. I waited until Corinne left for work, then carried it into the kitchen, where the light was bright and the windows overlooked the quiet backyard. I set it on the table, took a deep breath, and used the hammer to snap the small brass lock. The sound was sharper than I expected, echoing in the stillness. When I lifted the lid, I braced myself for, I don't even know what. Evidence of betrayal. Something incriminating. Something that would prove every suspicion I'd let grow these past few days. But it wasn't that. Inside was a neat stack of envelopes bound with a rubber band, a velvet box no bigger than my palm, and a folded piece of paper. My hands shook as I opened the paper first. It was a receipt, not from a hotel, but from a jewelry store in that same city where the boutique hotel had been. The date was from 2 days before she returned home. I opened the velvet box. Inside, nestled in white satin, was a gold watch, the same one I'd once pointed out in a shop window but told her I'd never spend the money on. The envelopes were filled with handwritten letters. Each one was addressed to me, written over the last few months. They were filled with little memories, apologies for being distant, and plans for our future. In one of them, she explained the business trip had been a cover for something she'd been organizing, a surprise anniversary celebration, booking a special venue, and buying the gift. The large men's t-shirt in the suitcase? Bought at a local shop because she'd spilled coffee on hers. The baseball cap? A souvenir from my collection. The phone charger? A freebie from the hotel. The lockbox, she wrote, had been her way of keeping everything together without me accidentally stumbling across it before the surprise. She hadn't counted on the airline mix-up forcing her to leave the suitcase behind temporarily, or the hotel having to store it when she left early. I sat there for a long time, letters spread out, the watch in my hand, feeling both ridiculous and relieved. All the shadows I'd been chasing had turned out to be just that, shadows. That evening, when she came home, I didn't confront her with accusations or questions. Instead, I handed her the lockbox and said, I think you were planning to give me this. Her face lit up, and in that moment, all the tension I'd been carrying drained away. For the first time in days, the silence between us wasn't wrong. It was comfortable.